is it that all of the second half of the night is an appropriate time for Trumas Hadeshin? So until you get to the morning, everything that turns into ashes is supposed to be removed, and it's not morning yet. At the time that Kriyas Hagever, when you're doing the Trumas Hadeshin, you're doing it too soon. If the second half of the night, you're supposed to keep on building up ashes, so it's not time yet to do a Harama Hadeshin. Doesn't fit. Ela Amar Rabbi Yochanan, rather Rabbi Yochanan explains, V'mashra Shenema Kol Halayla. So the pasuk says that Hi Allah Mukda Mizbech Kol Halayla Ada Boker, right? So any Yoder Shu Ada Boker. So obviously, if I say all night, that means up until the morning. So why does the pasuk say Kol Halayla Ada Boker? Matam Elomer Ada Boker. So that means that Tain Boker Levako Shalayla. That you have to give an additional, just like you create another morning. That it doesn't have to be the actual morning, but you can back it up a little bit. You can back it up a little bit. So if you back it up, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait all the way to the beginning of the morning. You can make your own morning. You could start a little bit earlier, so you have the ability to back it up based on the needs of the korbanos, the needs of that particular day, when it makes sense to start taking away the ashes so you can clear the mizbeach for the next day's service. Therefore, on most days, it's sufficient. You have a little bit of time before the service of the day that you do Trumas Hadeshin at the time of the calling of the Gever. So yeah, that's good enough. Yom Kippurim, but Yom Kippur, that you have to worry that the Kohen Gadol needs to rest, assuming he's the one who's going to be doing the Trumas Hadeshin. Tzika Chulsha the Kohen Gadol, Abdinan Mechatzos. So therefore, we have it taken care of already by midnight, and then he has a little bit of time to rejuvenate his spirits and his energy before he has to do more avoda and start offering the sacrifices in the morning. Regalim, the Nefishi Yisrael, and Nefishi Kabbanas, and Regalim, the Yomim Tovim, we have a lot of Jews who are going to come into the Yozorah based on Aliyah L'Rega, and you have a lot of Kabbanos that are going to be offered. And you also have a lot of dashing, you have a lot of ashes that are offered based on all of the Kabbanos. And you have to, number one, take a small amount of ashes for the Trumas Hadeshin, and then as Rashi says, you got to spend a lot of time shoveling the rest of the ashes into the tapuach, into this large pile that's in the middle. So therefore, you have to really back up and start very early, even before midnight. Already from the 10 p.m. mark. In the tiny timer, as it says, really the reasoning is given over there. That at the time of the Kriyas Hagever for the Regalim, even though it wasn't yet morning, the entire courtyard is filled with Jews who are all excited about the avoda of the day. My Kriyas Hagever, what's the calling out of the Gever? What is that? I said there are two opinions. One is that it's a person who is like the temple crier, a nice loud voice, right, to stir everybody to their avoda. And the other interpretation is it's when the rooster cockle-doodle-doo. So my kriyas together, Rav Makara Gava. Rav said it was this fellow, the guy who was in charge of crying out and calling and calling everyone to attention. The reveler. Rabbi Shela Amakra Tanagola. Rabbi Shela says no, it's when the rooster would crow. Rabbi Shela. Rab went to the town of Rabbi Shela. To make him alert to Rabbi Shela. There was nobody to serve as his interpreter. Rabbi Shela would give his drasha in Hebrew, and people would have to wouldn't necessarily understand all of the terms and the language that he was using. So he needed an interpreter and also somebody to explain the drasha in a way that the people would understand the concepts. So Kamrab Aleh, because so Rab served as the interpreter. He saw that the Makom Sheni Shishtadel Yosi, so he stepped in to fill the breach. Become Mefarish. So when Rabbi Shela spoke about Kriyas Hagever, Rab gave the interpretation that he knew. My Kriyas Hagever, Kara Gavra. It's when you had the announcer the temple crier call out that it's time for everybody to get started. So Amalei Rabbi Shela v'leima markurat tanagola. So Rabbi Shela said, suddenly stopped his drush. He turned to Rab and said, "Hey, you're my interpreter. You should interpret the way that I intended. When I say karagava, karagever, I meant that it's when the rooster crows." So Amalei, so Rab said an expression. He said, "Avuv lachari zemer." That if you have a nice flute that they used to use, like in the base of Mikdash, for free men who are very sophisticated, they think it's very nice. What I said is like a beautiful flute that most people consider to be very nice. The Gardai lo mekablu mine, but somebody who's just a common peasant, who's a weaver, who doesn't know any better, so he doesn't appreciate this beautiful flute. It's giving him a little musar. When I was in front of like the big gedolim, like Rabbi Chia, mefarishna my kriyas segeva karagava, and I would serve as his interpreter, and he would say kriyas segeva, and I would say it means that's when the temple crier cried out that people should get moving. And he didn't correct me. And you were like a mere, weaver compared to Rabbi Chia. You somehow don't like the sound of my interpretation. You want me to interpret it differently. So Rabbi Shela then realized that he was dealing with none other than the great Rav, who was serving as his interpreter, and he felt outclassed. So Amalei, Marni, you Rav, Nenach Mar. Wait a second, my interpreter, you're actually Rav. He didn't necessarily recognize him right away. Maybe he was wearing a mask. I don't know. He said, you should sit down and relax. You should go down, and I'll get somebody else to be my interpreter. This is beneath your dignity to be my interpreter. So Amalei. So I've said, Ami Inshi Tagwaslei Putsamre. People say if you've been hired to do something, then you should even air out a person's wool. That you have to, do even denigrating work. If you've been hired to work for somebody, you can't say something is beneath your dignity. This is my job to be Metorgman. I assume the job. I have to do it. So some say that what he said was a little different expression. That if you have somebody of my stature, he didn't mean to say it in a gaibatic way, but he's saying you have somebody of my qualifications who's serving as Metorgman, it wouldn't be nice to you if I would step down and somebody who was less qualified would continue. So therefore, it's appropriate that we keep it on, the same level of competency in terms of my continuing in this capacity. Tanya Kavasi Darav, Tanya Kavasi Darav Bishela. So Brisa supports Rav, Brisa that supports Rav Bishela. Tanya Kavasi Darav, Gavine Cruz Ma Omer, that we find that the person who was the announcer, right, the person who was the temple crier, his name was Gavini. So he would get up and he would make a loud announcement. It would be heard all around. That the sound was heard, throughout the land. Imdu kohanim lavodoschem. He would say, "Kohanim, get up for your avodah. Leviim leduchanam, leduchanchem. Leviim, get up to stand on your platform to sing. Yisrael mamadchem. Yisrael to serve on your various watches, that you should have your different rotations in the base of Mikdash, and go to your minyanim and whatever else the mamodim would do, your prayers. Vayakolo nishma b'shalosh parsos, and his voice was heard at a distance of 3 parasangs. 3 parasangs is about 12 kilometers. Ma'aseh Agrippas Hamelech. Agrippas Hamelech was during the second base of Mikdash period. He once heard from a very far distance the calling out of the announcer. This wasn't on Yom Kippur. If it was Yom Kippur, he wouldn't have been traveling on the road. It was some other day. V'shama kolo b'gimel parsos, and he heard the call of the temple crier 3 parasangs away. Shabbat Leveso, and he was so impressed that when he came back home to his palace, Shigelo Matanus, he sent him gifts. The king sends you gifts, so it's probably precious jewels, a nice treasure chest. He was so impressed. He was so taken by it. Nonetheless, the Kohen Gadol, this Brisa continues to say for our purposes, the main part of the Brisa was the beginning, that it shows that it was a person who made the announcement and called out the Kriyas HaGever. But the Brisa goes on to say the Kohen Gadol's voice on Yom Kippur could be heard even further away. that when he would say Ana Hashem during the Yom Kippur service and beseech Kadosh Baruch Hu for forgiveness, the Nishma Kolo B'Yericho, that his voice would be heard all the way in Yericho, which was even further than 3 parasangs. Amar Rabba, what? Right, but at least we know that this was something that did happen on occasion. From Yerushalayim to Yericho was 10 parasangs, 40 kilometers. And the Kohen Gadol's voice was that much stronger, despite the fact that this was our Yom Kippur and he was fasting. That on the regular day, when Gavina Cruz would announce, he wouldn't be so weak. But here we're talking about the Kohen Gadol, who's already in the middle of his service when he's fasting, and yet his voice would carry so much further. And not only that, but it was the daytime, and in the case of Gavina Cruz, it was at the time of Kriyas HaGeber, so it was still nighttime. Nighttime voices carry much further. Why is it that voices carry much further during the nighttime? The price is not finished yet. Why is it that a person's voice is not heard as well during the day as the night? Because it's much more of a din. But the din is not necessarily that of people. Even if everybody is inside their homes, there's still the din of the sun. There's some sort of the wheel, the rotation of the sun, or different interpretations of galgal. It could be the ball of the sun. Somehow the sun generates noise as there's a rotation between the earth and the sun. However it works. That it is like soaring in the firmament, the way that a chorosh, the way that a carpenter would saw the sawdust out of a cedar wood. And this this noise of that's created through the sawdust, through the sawing of the sawdust of the wheel of the sun, is called law. It's called like no, right? It's like nothing. Because you look in the sky, you see a little bit of haze before the sun. That's the sawdust. That's like a nothing. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar said. He said that all of the residents, all of the inhabitants of the world, the pasuk in Daniel, are considered like law. It means like nothing, but this nothing is a very specific nothing. It's the nothing of the sawdust that gets sawed through the sun's revolution over the course of the day. Satana Rabbanim Male Gago Chama. On this note, we're continuing. This is all a continuation of the brisa that supported Rav's opinion that Kriyas HaGever is a person. Tana Rabbanim Male Gago Chama Nishma Kol Amona Male Gago Chama Kama Nishma Kol Amona Sharomi. If not for the noise generated through this the wheel or the ball of the sun, you would be able to hear the throngs of multitudes in Rome. And if not for the throngs of the multitudes in Rome, then you'd be able to hear the soaring created by the sun in the firmament. Nishma kol gadol chama. You have a reference to hearing the throngs of the multitudes in Rome. And Rabbi Akiva was walking, I think, on the Temple Mount with his kaverim, and they were able to hear it. So Meforshim explained that must have been during the nighttime. Tana Rabbanan shalosh kolos holchi misofa olamet. Sofa, there are 3 noises, 3 sounds that go from one end of the earth to the other, one end of the universe to the other. One is this noise that's generated by the movement of the sun, the call or the movement around the sun. Whoever understood, it's not necessarily a scientific concept. The Maharsha tries to explain it all scientifically in terms of how we understand the science of where the sun goes at night, during the day, and so forth. The Maharal says that you're not supposed to understand this concept of the Galgal Kama literally. It's meant for homiletic purposes, metaphysical purposes. It has a much deeper meaning. The Kol Amonasha. Johns Hopkins put a compilation similar. Oh, so that supports the Maharsha. So the Maharsha says that this is really scientific. Okay, good. Oh, that's very good. It's like a different frequency. Different frequencies. The Kol Hamona Sharomi, thank you. The Kol Hamona Sharomi, and the also the noise and the multitudes in Rome. The call neshama b'shash yotzim min haguf, and the noise of the soul when it departs from the body. V'yeshoyim mafleda, and some say the noise of a woman giving birth. V'yesh omrim af ridia, and some say it's also the noise when the top of chapal from an aleph now. The noise generated by an angel who's called Ridia, which is a reference, Ridia, to an ox that threshes in the field, that's used for plowing purposes. Because the pasuk lo sacharosh is interpreted by the Targum as lo sirdi, right? And this is the angel that's in charge of the war, how much water is apportioned to different parts of the earth. And this angel apparently looks like a young calf, so that's why it's called Ridia. Uvar and Rakami, and it gives instructions, so the Malach gives instructions to the different places in the earth as to where the rain should fall. Uvar Rabban and Rakami and Neshama b'shash yotzim min haguf bat luah. Chachamim, however, ask for mercy with respect to the noise of the neshama when it leaves the body, so that that one would be eradicated, that particular noise, either that it should be more comfortable, or that they allow for the possibility that it not be eternal, that it's not something that has to happen forever, that it's bila mavis lanetzach at some point. Tanya Kabasi the Rabbi. Who? Oh, Gavini. Not Lavdafka. No, I don't think so. In Yisrael, he could have been in Yisrael who was doing his job in the Azara. The Yisraelim are allowed to be in the first 11 Amos of the Azara. The places Yisraelim could be. Tanya Kavasi the Rabbi Shela. There's a price that supports Rabbi Shela. So now we had a price that supported Rav that the Kriyas Ageva was done through a human being. Now a price that supports Rabbi Shela was done through the rooster. Somebody who goes on a trip before the Kriyas Agever, so his blood is on his head because it's dangerous to go when you don't have good lighting. Rabbi Yoshi says that it has the Kriyas Agever has to happen twice. And some say it has to happen 3 times. What's the Kriyas Agever? Raise the Tanagol. We're talking about a Kriyas Gever. The Gever is a male chicken. It's a rooster. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the cock. And we're talking about a rooster that's a normal average rooster that doesn't start crowing too early and doesn't start crowing too late. And that's how you measure in accordance with a normal rooster. I remember my great aunt and uncle lived in Bnei Brak, so they lived right outside of like a farm where there was this rooster that would cackle doodle doo all day and all night. It was obviously not an average, normal rooster at all. So Amar Rav Yehuda, and no sin bina. This one didn't have too much. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav B'shah Yisrael Olin the Regel, when the Jews would go up to the Regel Yontif. They would stand very, very close together, but when they would bow down, it would be spread out. So when they would stand, generally speaking, if it wasn't the time for the bowing of the avoda, so they would spread out, that they only occupied the first 11 amos going south to north in the Azara, meaning they occupied the entire area south to north. For the first 11 amos that went east to west. So starting east to west, so that entire 11 amos, they occupied the entire area from south to north for 11 amos. And then according to Rashi, there's a lot that Rashi adds here that's not in the text. They wouldn't occupy the entire Azara because Kohanim had to do avoda in the Azara, and Yisraelim really weren't supposed to go past that, of those 11 amos going from east to west. So they would go in the chambers that were around the Azara, and the chambers would continue all the way to the end of, what the area that corresponded to the Heichal, not only the Azara, but then the Heichal, and then the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and then it would continue for another 11 amos after the western side of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Where there, they could also fill up the entire area. And that's this part. So continue another 11 amos behind the Beis HaKaporos. Then Rashi says that when it came time for them to bow at the appropriate times in the service, so then they would all come back to the area in the Azara, because we're supposed to bow in the Azara, and somehow at that point in time, at those points in the service, there was still enough room for everybody to not only stand but also bow down. So my kama haki kamer. So what is this? What is this saying? If they were bowing down and the place somehow was able to expand miraculously, so why did they have to? Why did they have to go so far? So pshat is like this, as I explained, as Rashi says. Even though when they didn't have to bow, it was so it was so congested that they had to, use the entire area all around the Azaras and all the way in the back of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Nonetheless, when the time came for them to bow, they would all come into the eastern sides. They would bow on the eastern side of the Mizbeach within the Azara, and there was room for everybody not only to be there but also to bow down. This is one of the miracles that was done in the Mesa Mikdash. We should all merit to be able to have these miracles. Again, Titanan, as the Mishnah says, Asara Nisim Nasa B'Beis HaMikdash. There were 10 miracles that were in the Beis HaMikdash. Pila Isha Mereach Basar Hekdesh, that women never had a miscarriage through the tremendous smell of the Basar Hekdesh, the Basar of the Kachim, as it was being prepared and as it was being burned and as it was being cooked. So it could be something that would create a sensation of tremendous desire. A woman, pregnant woman, when she feels a tremendous desire to eat, so that could generate a miscarriage, but it never happened. And Basar Hekdesh never went rancid. It never went bad. And in the kitchen where the kabbanos were being prepared, there was never a fly. It would have been, an element of disgust. There was never a fly in the basement. We're discussing how there were steps taken to keep the Kohen Gadol awake so he shouldn't have a nocturnal emission. There was even another Kohen Gadol prepared on reserve. So it never happened that a Kohen Gadol should have the nocturnal emission on Yom Kippurim. We see that even though there were miracles, it's still appropriate to take steps, not to be summoned on the miracles. Lo nimsa, because they would take all these steps to keep him awake and so forth. Lo nimsa psul ba'omer, and that they did not find any kind of a psul, a blemish with respect to the omer on the second day of Pesach, that it had to be cut from the second night of Pesach, and they would only cut the amount that was exactly as much as they needed. So if anything would have gone wrong, there would have been some sort of a blemish, a tumah, that would have disqualified the Omer. They wouldn't have been able to bring another one. And the same thing with the Shtei Alechem. The Shtei Alechem, they would bake on Friday before Shabbos. They wouldn't be able to bake it again if something went wrong afterwards that they discovered when they put it out on Shabbos. Lechem upon him. Similarly, on the Lechem upon him that was prepared for Shavuos. I'm sorry, Shtei Alechem that was prepared for Shavuos. So Lechem upon him was prepared for every single Shabbos. So there was never a psul, even though these things were prepared beforehand and had to remain 100% intact. It was always there was never any kind of psul. Okay, hold on. Yeah, so the lechem upon him had to be prepared on Erev Shabbos, and the Shtei Alechem was prepared on Erev Yontiv as well. Okay, so if things would have gone wrong, they couldn't have done replacement ones, but then things never went wrong. They would stand very close to each other, the people in the Azara, but they would still be able to find miraculously space to bow. Below Hizik to spread out. Below Hizik Nakash V'Akwa B'Yushalayim Miolam. There was never any kind of harm afflicted, any bite that was administered by a snake or a scorpion in Yerushalayim. And nobody ever complained about being in Yerushalayim, that they didn't have enough place to stay or that they didn't have enough food. That somehow everybody was always satisfied, no matter how many people were in Yerushalayim. Wait a second, but the last two things we said, there were 10 nisim in the base of Mikdash, but the last two have to do Yerushalayim. There's no biting of snakes in Yerushalayim and no discomfort of people who stayed in Yerushalayim. So we say, Ika atartiach v'naisa b'Mikdash. There were two other miracles in the base of Mikdash that we find in a brisa. The Tanya, the Brisa says, "Me'olam lo kavah geshama esha shel atzei hamaracha," that the rains, even though the atzei maracha, the wood of the fire on the mizbeach was outside exposed in the courtyard, the rains never extinguished the fire. And the smoke of the maracha of the fire on the mizbeach, even all the winds of the world would come along, it would never move the smoke of the maracha, it would never sway it in different directions. So that's another two. Okay, so we have the 8 of the original Mishnah, and then we have the 2 of the Bryce that gives us 10. The Suleka, you don't have any more miracles from the base of Mikdash. Ratayim, but there's the Bryce say Shmaya Bekalnabo, that Rabbi Shmaya, who was from the place called Kalnabo, right? Mikalnabo, it should say. Shivei Klecheres that they would when they would cook.
The last 2 that were in the Brisa, was that only in Beis Hamikdash Rishon or in Beis Hamikdash Sheni also?
There's no distinction that's made. The implication is that there will be certain distinctions that are going to be mentioned between the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash. Right now, our assumption is that this was true with respect to the second Beis Hamikdash as well. All right. So, but isn't there this additional? It's a good question, though. There's this additional question, the additional miracle that the Brisa says the clay cheres would have to be buried, because once the kachim were cooked in them, so any belios, any absorptions of the kachim after the time you would be allowed to eat the kachim, let's say it was the chatas, you could only eat it in the nighttime and the daytime, so the belios would become nosar, and you couldn't kasher a kli cheres. A kli cheres, we say that whatever gets absorbed never comes out afterwards, so therefore they'd have to get rid of the kli cheres. But instead of them having to find a special place to bury the clay cheres, they would just miraculously get absorbed into the ground. Abaye says similarly, Morav notes that the inner parts of the birds of the ola sa'op, the burnt offering of a bird, that also had to be removed from the bird before it was burned on the mizbeach. That's the feathers or the notza, the morah, it's kind of like the intestines of it. And also the ashes of the inner mizbeach that were also had to be brushed away, right? And they had to be placed with the truma sadeshin, where the ashes that were taken from the outer mizbeach of the azara, they were all placed on the eastern side of the azara. You would walk up, 10 amos from the south side of the kevish, and then you would place a few tvachim away. You would place you go like this. You would go about when the Kohen would go down the ramp. Rashi says he would turn to the north, and then he would walk alongside the eastern ramp, the eastern part of the ramp at 10 amos. And then on that little side over there, on the eastern side of the ramp, 10 amos from the southern side of the ramp. So on the eastern side, he would put all of these ashes and so forth. So these different aspects of what was placed there, the morah and the notza of the ola sa'of, and the ashes from the mizbeach hapnimi b'dishan menorah, and also the ashes from the menorah and the eichon nivlam b'mkomon. These would happen to be absorbed into the ground. It sounds like the ashes from the mizbeach hachitzon of the main mizbeach, the outer mizbeach, I should say, that was in the azara. Those didn't get absorbed because those you had a mitzvah that they had to be a hotzas hadeshin on occasion. They had to be removed altogether from the Beis Hamikdash area. So this was also a miracle that all these other items got absorbed into the ground. So we say psule tlosa havu chashvinu bechad, that the psul that we mentioned earlier of the Omer and the Shtei Alechem and Alechem upon him, those were 3 miracles that they never went bad. The Omer never became possible, the Shtei Alechem never became possible, the Lechem upon him never became possible, none of them ever became invalidated. We had counted those as 3 miracles, so those were really only 1 miracle. So that gives us the opportunity to bring another, 2 miracles to add. So we say chashvinu b'chad. We only count them as one. So apik tray, va'ili tray. So therefore, we can remove we can remove the two of them, right? From the original count of 10, that gives us only 8. And now we can add another two miracles. And what were these two miracles? The two miracles as well were the bluin, the things that got absorbed into the ground. That we said that the clay cheres got absorbed into the ground, and all of these different types of ashes and the residue of korbanos got absorbed into the ground. So that's our additional 2 that we now are able to fill in, so that we have a total of 10 again. But wait a second. Once we're saying that when things didn't get invalidated, that only counts as one miracle. We count them all together. So let's count the things that got absorbed into the ground altogether: the clay cheres and the morav and notza and deshin. Rather than being considered 2 miracles that they got absorbed into the ground, it should be 1, right? So blue and nami, trey abu, chashvinum bechad. You should only count those 2 different miracles, one of the clay cheres and the other 2 of the different types of ashes and residue should only be counted as 1 miracle as well. So now again, I only have 9. So I'm missing 1. So we say ikanami akarisi, we have a 10th miracle. It was a great miracle with the lechem upon him, even though it was baked on Friday of 1 week. It was put on the table the next day on Shabbos. It was eaten the following Shabbos on the 9th day, counting the day that it was baked and the day that it was eaten. It was on the 9th day. Nonetheless, it remained warm and remained delicious. Saluko kesiduro. That when you took it off the following Shabbos, it was just as hot and delicious as when it was placed down. As it says in Pasuk and Shmuel, that it would be warm bread on the day that you took it. It's as the same as when you placed it down in the first place. There no more. So that's 10. That works, but there seems to be more. The Suleka says there really no more. We have a tradition. Then in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, when you counted the 20 amos, it was 20 amos wide. Nonetheless, somehow, if you counted the aron itself, it didn't occupy any space at all. It didn't occupy any space. There was 10 amos of avir, of open space in each direction from the aron. When you counted from the base of kaporis, from the aron and the covering of the aron, so it sounds like the aron miraculously didn't occupy any space. Similarly, the kruvim, the body of the kruvim, didn't occupy any space, because each one of the wings was 10 amos long, was 10 amos wide, and if you counted from the wingspan, so that would occupy 20 amos. You wouldn't be able to count the bodies at all. So somehow the bodies didn't take up any space. So the Gemara answers, Nisi the Varaika Chashi, Nisi the Gavai Loka Chashi. We only count the miracles that people could see outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. These miracles occurred in the Kodesh HaKadoshim that we don't count. So we say lechem upon him. If you're not counting the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you shouldn't count the Kodesh either. You only count that which was in the Azara that everybody could see. You can't see what happened in the Kodesh. The lechem upon him also was a miracle that was inside the inner chambers, inner sanctum of the base of Mikdash. So why are we counting that miracle? So we say, no, lechem panim nisi devarayu. No, that was a miracle that you could see on the outside. What does it mean that the table was tahor? The table on which the lechem panim was placed was pure, that it was tahor, was purified. It was purified, that means it was susceptible of it becoming tameh. Tameh klaushu tameh. So it sounds like it's mikabel tuma. But how is it mikabel tuma? The table of the shubred was made out of wood. It was gilded gold, but it was made out of wood. Klietz and also in achasu. It was a large, heavy table that was never ever moved. If you have a large table that's never moved, we have a principle called kliyet sesol in achas in mekabel tuma. It's not susceptible to receiving tuma, so why call it tar? It could even be a separation, a barrier against tuma. So it shows it was moved. It was moved. That's why it was susceptible of tuma. It was moved, and it was shown to the people who came up with Yom Tov to show people, look at this, a tremendous miracle of this bread that was baked last week and it's still fresh. See how beloved we are in front of Hashem, that Hashem keeps the bread fresh, that it's just as warm and just as fresh a week later. As we mentioned before, Pastor Kishmu. Okay, good. But are there no more miracles? Again, we're questioning whether there was really only 10. The Amar Rav Oshia B'Shara Shebana Shlomo Beis Hamikdash. Rav Oshia says that when Shlomo built the Beis Hamikdash, not to Komine Migodim, that he planted within it all kinds of delicacies, all kinds of delicious fruit. Shelzav, and they were made out of gold. But despite the fact they were made out of gold, they produced real fruit. Fruit would be miraculously produced. When the winds would blow into the Beis Hamikdash, they would fall off. Noshrin, Shnei Amar, as it says, Yirash, when there would be noise, there would be winds. Kalavonon, Piryo. So that because the Lebanon is a reference to the Beis Hamikdash, it would cause the Beis Hamikdash to yield its fruit. When the Nachum came to the Heichel to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, unfortunately, Yavash. So then, miraculously, these fruits dried up because the Nachum were not worthy of them. Shenema ufarach Lebanon umulal. That this flowering of Lebanon, the Beis Hamikdash, became desolate. That's a pasuk in Nachum. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to restore these miraculous temple fruit. Shenema parach tifrach b'sagel, that they should blossom again, and you shall rejoice. Afki las beranein, rejoicing and singing. Kavod Lebanon nasanlah, that the glory of the Lebanon, the Beis Hamikdash, will be given back. So the Gemara says, Nisi the Kavi lo kachashiv, that the miracles that were there all the time, that weren't just like, an event that occurred from time to time, like the fruits of the miraculous fruits of Shlomo HaMelech were there all the time. So those don't get mentioned. So Ashad Asis Lahachi. So once we say that those that were there all the time are not included in the count, so we have another answer as to why the miracle that the Aron and the Kruvim were there, but they didn't take up any space. So that we have another reason why it wasn't counted, because that was a constant, persistent miracle. Aron Kruvim Nami, you see the Kavininu, so that's why it's not counted. So Amar, so we also mentioned that the smoke of the maracha, of the pyre, was never swayed by the wind this way or that way. Since when was there smoke in the maracha? The Brisa says, the 5 things said about the fire of the maracha, that it crouched like a lion, ubara kachama, and it was clear as the sun. The yesh mamish, and it had actual substance. The ochelas lachen kiyavation, and it would be able to consume nesachim, just like it would consume limbs, things that were of a liquid form would also get consumed. And it did not have any smoke come out of it. So how could you say there was smoke? So we say no. Here we're talking about the hedyot, the fire there was fire that was provided by the heavens, by a Kodesh Baruch Hu. But then in addition to that fire, the humans were supposed to add their own fire. So when we say that there was fire, that's talking about the one that was furnished by the hedyot, the one that we had to furnish in addition to the one that came down from heaven. Tanya's the price that says, the Bnei Aaron, the Kohanim, had to put their own fire in the Mizbeach. Even though there was a fire that came down from heaven, miraculously, nonetheless, we're also supposed to bring our own fire. What do you mean that the smoke looked like it was crouched? Like it was crouched like a lion? That Tanya the Brisa says, I don't even see it. I saw it. I saw the smoke. You ever get to your point, Eddie? What Beis Hamikdash are we talking about? Because I saw the smoke with and it looked like it was crouching. The fire. Here we're talking about the fire. I saw the fire. The fire looked like it was crouched like a dog. It had like the shape of a dog. So we say lo kasha. That's no contradiction. Kama Mikdash Rishon. Mikdash Rishon. It was built by Malchus Yehuda compared to an Ari, a lion. So therefore, the fire looked like a lion. Kama Mikdash Sheni was built by the Persians, so it looked like a dog. Mikdash Sheni mihavai. But where do we find in Mikdash Sheni we had this all together? We're assuming that you had the fire in Mikdash Sheni. That it says a pasuk in Chagai that the second Beis Hamikdash will be the Ikavda, will be a place of glory. But the word Ikavda is written without the hey. But Karina Mikavda, we read it with a hey, but it doesn't have a hey. Why doesn't it have a hey? Because the second Beis Hamikdash was missing 5 things. Second Beis Hamikdash was missing 5 things. Here were the 5 major things that were missing. That's one thing. that there was missing in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Aron, together with his covering and together with the Kruvim and the cherubs. Eish, the second thing was missing was the special fire that came down. Ushchina, and it was missing the Shchina, the Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit was not felt in the second base of Mikdash. Ushchina v'Ruach HaKodesh v'Urim v'Tumim. So it was missing, number one, the Shechina. It was two different things. Number one, missing the Shechina. Number two, missing the Ruach HaKodesh. It wasn't like a divine light. There wasn't a divine spirit. And it was also missing the Urim B'Tumim. Tosfos says that the Kohen Gadol needed to wear the Urim B'Tumim as part of his Choshen, but so there was Urim B'Tumim, it just didn't work. It's a machlokes. It's the Rambam seems to say as well. The Ravid says, no, there really was no Urim B'Tumim in the second base of Mikdash. So I mean, in Haba, Siyu'e lo Messiah. So the answer is there was a fire in the base of Mikdash, but a Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't assist the fire, meaning that the fire was brought by the head yoke, but it wasn't assisted with a special fire min hashemayim. Tana Rabban and Sheish Isho saying there are six different fires, okay? Yesh ochelas ve'eno shoseh. There's a fire that eats but doesn't drink. We'll get to each of these. There's a fire that drinks but doesn't eat. There's a fire that eats and drinks. It's a fire that eats up the moist together with the dry. And there's also an Aisha that can dispel another Aish. And then there's a fire that can eat up a fire. The first one is the fire that eats but doesn't drink. Hadidon. That's our fires. Our fires eat but don't drink. Meaning that they one second. Hadidon. Hadidon. That it's that it consumes, but it doesn't. But it doesn't drink that which is moist. Is not consumed. I'm sorry. Meaning it gets put out by liquid. Hadidon. Shosev eino ocheles, and a fire which which drinks but doesn't eat. That's decholin. That's for sick people, because sick people have like a fire of fever, and their fever causes them to be thirsty but not to be hungry. Ocheles v'shoseh de'elio, eats and drinks. That's the fire of Elio. Because the fire consumed even the water that was in the canal when he had like the fire that came down from heaven to show that he was a truthful Navi and not the Nabi Baal. That it either fire even consumed the water in the canal. Ocheles laken kiyavation, fire that eats the moist together with the dry. That's the Ma'ach, as we mentioned. It's the fire that burns in the Mizbech. Ish Esha Docha Esh, the Gabriel fire that's able to push away another fire. Gabriel, when he saved Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah from the burning furnace, they were placed into by Nebuchadnezzar. So he cooled the fire that was within, and he burnt up the area that was without. So the people who threw them into the fiery furnace got burnt themselves. So that was the fire that kind of like it was extinguished in one place and then ended up consuming in a different place. And a fire that devours fire, that's the fire of Shechina, but the Shechina devoured the angels that are made from fire. The Amamar Hoshi, that's spelled by name. Kadosh Baruch Hu put out his finger, so Kabiyachol, between the angels who said, Ma'anoshki Siskaveno didn't want to create man, and caused them all to be burned and consumed with the fire of the Shechina. Also, the fire, the smoke on the Maracha, we mentioned that all the winds of the world, also do not move it from its place, from its straight path. So is this really true? The Gemara is going to ask. The last night of the Yontif of after Yontif of Sukkot, Hakot Sofin le'ashana Maracha. Everybody watches the smoke of the Maracha to see what type of simon it's going to provide for the year ahead. So they just prayed for rains, right, on Shmini Atzeres. So now they want to see what is going to be the response to their prayer. So this is what the direction of the smoke on the Mizbeach would indicate. Notel Klapi Tzapon, if it would move to the north, that means that to be a very strong southern wind. Aniyim Smechen, so that would mean that there's going to be lots and lots of rains, right? And the Aniyim would be happy because there'll be an abundance of fruits. tzavin, but the balabatim who own the fields would be sad because there'd be such an abundance that they'd have to keep on moving the fruit along to keep on selling it. They couldn't store it and hoard it, and they couldn't charge big prices. They shigish meshana Reuben pay with stand markibin because the fruit are going to go bad if they don't keep on moving the fruit because they keep on getting new rains. They have to move the fruit out, and as a result, the prices go down. Not the klapi darim, if it would go in the southern direction, that means it would be a strong northern wind. At Savin, the poor people would be sad because it means there wouldn't be an abundance of rain. So Bali Batim smechem, Bali Batim would be happy because there'd be enough rain for fruit to be produced, but they'd be able to store it properly and charge high prices for it. Not so much rain, but and therefore they'd be able to have the fruit not get ruined. They don't have to move the fruit so quickly. They could charge more money. Not to klape mizrach hako, supply and demand, kind of considerations. Not to klape mizrach hako smechen. If the smoke would go in an eastern direction, it'd be a strong western wind. Everybody would be happy because everything would be in moderation. Klape marav towards the west, that's bad news. An eastern wind, bad news. Hakol atzeben, then the azav azik kitikli biduri law of a mivder, because then the rain would come along, but would not be spread out properly if it would be an eastern wind, because it's the type of wind that dries up the zroim. It dries up all of the it dries up all of the seeds in the field. So we've mentioned that if it's towards the east, everyone's happy. Eastern wind, everyone's sad. Or minu, Mizrach is the olam yafeh. But don't we learn that the eastern wind is always good? So why then klapi marav akolat sevin? Marav is the olam kasher, and the western wind is always bad. Ruach tzefonis yafeh lechitin. And the northern wind is good for wheat. Once it's a third grown, bad for olives. Once they're ripe. Southern wind bad for wheat once it's reached a third of growth. Good for olives when they have become ripe. And you can remember which is good for which, because the shulchan, which was for the lechem, which comes from wheat, was but sapon. So we said that the sapon was good for the wheat. Menorah b'darim, and menorah, which was made from olive oil, which comes from olives. So we said the southern wind was good for the olives. Menorah b'darim. Hi ma'abedidei, hi ma'abedidei. That each one was, good for what was good for their direction, right? The north was good for the shulchan, and the southern wind was good for the menorah. So, what about the fact that we have a kasha with respect to the eastern winds and the western winds? So we say lo kasha, halon halahu. It depends whether we're speaking about Bavel or whether we're speaking about Eretz Yisrael. And that the eastern wind is going to be good for Bavel because it's a moist land, and therefore it doesn't need too much. But for Eretz Yisrael, because it's an Eretz Harim Uvekaos, it has lots of mountains and hills. So the eastern wind is not going to be good because if you don't have, because it's going to cause dryness based on the way in which the wind comes in. It's going to cause a sadness because all of the zroim, all of the seeds are going to be dry. They don't have the same type of moisture that would be able to sustain the seeds as in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, the eastern wind would be more problematic. Okay, so we will stop here, and everyone have a good day. Yes, Hashem.